Greetings, everyone, and I hope you're having a great week. I'm here again today to just share with you a little bit, something that's been on my mind, and I apologize, but it's just another hat kind of a day. So I also thought I'd just mention, maybe I'll get some feedback on this. My wife told me a couple of weeks ago I ought to start calling these Devos with Dave. So for all of you folks that are not quite, with the in crowd, most words get shortened today, especially in text messages, but now even in our everyday language. So Devo is devotional. So Devos with Dave, and Devos is just a little too cool for me. And Dave, as some of you know, that's not my name, even though I get called that a lot the last several years. So I'm not voluntarily calling myself that. So I guess we'll just stick with thought for the day at this point, even though that's not all that creative, but I think it gets the message across. I want to talk to you today. There's two words that are almost the same word except for one letter. There's only one letter difference in those two words. That's the word macro and micro. One of the common ways, at least for me, one of the common ways I've heard those two terms used is with regards to economics. So you have macroeconomics and microeconomics. And so in essence, macroeconomics is kind of a big picture view. It could be a big picture view of the economy in the U.S. And then microeconomics is when you kind of narrow it down really all the way maybe to an individual. So one of those is a big picture view, and the other one is a very narrow view. And it just kind of occurred to me the other day that in our walk with God, in our ministries, we have both of those. We have macro and micro views. I think the challenge is we tend to get caught up more often than not in the micro view. And in the micro view would be our day-to-day struggles, the challenges that we go through in relationships, in our walk with God, in ministry, in our physical bodies, and so that's the micro. And a lot of times, obviously not all the time, but a lot of times that micro view can get a little bit overwhelming, which is why we need to every now and then kind of step back and get the macro big picture view. A couple of weeks ago, I got to church when we were before we had stopped streaming and taken a break on Sunday mornings at the church. I got there, and there was a bag by my door, and there was a box in that bag and a note, and I pulled it out, and it was I forget the exact brand. It's not Legos, but they're very similar to Legos, and it was actually this Dallas Cowboys hat, which I'm sure several of you are thrilled to see. And by the way, I don't have my Redskins colored shirt on today. I wasn't thinking of it when I put this on, but my shirt color matches the Cowboys colors. So coincidence, but it works. Anyway, it was from Jalen, who knows, as a number of you, I'm sure. We do puzzles when we've gone out of town on family trips. And then when all of this first started and thought maybe we were only in it a couple of days, Esther and I did a puzzle together, and then she did a few puzzles. And so Jalen gave me this football helmet, and as a sort of an option or distraction from a puzzle. As I was doing it, I started questioning how much he really cared for me and loved me, because it was quite a process. These pieces, in fact, you probably can't see it well. That's the biggest piece of the set, and it was, I think, 1,300 pieces total. That's I take that back. There's a couple of pieces on the top that are square pieces, 3 of them, and they were all towards the very end of the helmet. So for the rest of the helmet, this is the biggest piece. In fact, the majority of the time, these were the pieces, which I'm pretty sure you cannot see, or at least not see very well. The smallest one I have here is the 2-piece piece. I don't know what you call it better than that. There's also a piece that's just one. It's half the size of this, and they were literally dozens, if not 100 or more of those. And I have to tell you, there was a lot of times in which I was caught up in the micro. Basically, every layer here is a single layer of pieces like these. And as I was caught up in the micro pieces, there was a number of times I was very frustrated. In fact, in the evenings when I would work on it, I would actually use the big light that we used for, or we use for our live streams from the home, because I could not see the pieces very well, and I could not see the instructions very well. And that, of course, was with my glasses on. There was several times, probably a bunch of times, actually. I think a bunch is more than several. So there was a bunch of times throughout the building of it where I messed up some pieces, and I had to redo that particular layer. And so it was very easy to get caught up in the micro pieces. I actually ended up with a pair of needle nose pliers and a pocket knife that was used, because these 48-year-old chubby fingers are not designed the best for these micro-sized building block pieces. Nevertheless, as I would also pause and look at the box, which was in this context that macro view, I would see where I was going, and as frustrating and as discouraging as I got at times, and I think my stubbornness was definitely a benefit in this process, because I was more than determined to see it all the way through. But I would have to look at that macro view to remind me of what I was getting at. I think the Apostle John says something in his first epistle that relates to this, and these are some of my favorite verses. The combination of these 3 verses and what they say, and the message of hope and faith that they should inspire in us as believers. And so John says this, 1 John chapter 3 and verse 1. Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. Beloved, now are we the sons of God. And here it is. Here's kind of this micro versus macro view. We are, right now, if we have been born again, we are the sons of God. But then he says this, it doth not yet appear what we shall be, the big picture finished product. But we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Again, in that verse, to me, you've got the micro and you've got the macro. We are right now sons of God, but we also are not everything we're going to be. We are not the finished product yet. And then the next verse, which is an extremely encouraging verse to me and I hope it is to you. And if it's not one that's already in your readily accessible repertoire of verses by memory, I'm encouraging you to get it there. He says, every man that has this hope in him purifieth himself even as he is pure. That means that while I am caught up in this micro view of where I am, oftentimes, and I'm pretty sure I'm not in the minority on this one, oftentimes frustrated with where I am, frustrated by the individual pieces of where I am. There is a macro picture of where I'm going, but not only is there this picture of where I'm going, there is this hope that is working inside of me that I will get there. Of course, you know, one of the wonderful things about the difference between me building this helmet and God as the potter for us is he makes no mistakes. He does not put any piece in the wrong place and have to go back and redo that piece. I will acknowledge there are times that the pieces he chooses at that moment do not make sense at that moment. But because he is the master builder, every piece is purposefully and timely put into place. I've used this many times in my ministry, and many of you have heard me use it many times, and I apologize because it just fits again with this today. And that is just the simple analogy of what it is like on a cloudy, rainy, stormy day that you have the opportunity to fly in an airplane. You get in that airplane, and while you sit in it at the airport and you're getting situated, you go out to the runway, the flight takes off. It is normally what we don't consider to be a beautiful day. We consider a rainy day figuratively to be a kind of a bad day, or at least a negative day. But you get in that airplane and it takes off and it begins to climb, and eventually it gets in the clouds and then finally breaks through the clouds, and there is a completely different perspective on the other side. But there's also another part of that which I don't necessarily use as the focus of that analogy, but that's not so much on the cloudy day, because this doesn't work on a cloudy day. But when you fly on a partly cloudy or a clear sky day, it is amazing to me, and as a kid it was really amazing, and I have to say there's still a part of it even as a grown adult that is always a bit intriguing to me. And that is when you look down where you came from, things that appear when you're on the ground to be so big, all of a sudden become so small. I mean, 18-wheelers that you may drive down the road in your car, and they may fly by you, and that wind kind of shuffles your car some, and maybe startles you a little bit if you weren't really expecting it. Those 18-wheelers that while you're on the ground next to them seem massive, they become very cute little cars. In fact, it reminds me, I think, I don't remember them when I was a kid, but I don't know if they're still around or not, but one of the things my brother had when he was a kid was micro machines, and micro machines were cars and other things that were very small. I grew up with Matchbox cars, but Matchbox cars were much larger than micro machines, and it kind of reminds me of that. And bottom line is, a Matchbox car is still pretty small, so you can look down and you can see the highway, you can see the cars on the highway, and everything seems so small, all because your perspective has changed. And I want to encourage some of you today, and others of you, maybe this is just a seed to be sown that you will need in the future. But we really, periodically, we must take a moment to kind of step back and get that macro view of what God has already done. Because again, if we get so caught up in the micro view, especially if we're in a time of struggle, we can forget how much God has already done in our lives. And so we've got to periodically take that macro view, that perspective, where we see things from that big picture. Because to me, that is an encouraging, that's an uplifting place. I think we live, and I think the way we must live on a day-to-day basis is more so that micro level. But God designed the macro level. God designed, he made it so every now and then we can rise above our circumstances and see things from a very different perspective. There's a song, surprise, surprise, that I also think fits so well with this. There was a group, I think kind of the mid-'80s into the '90s, somewhere in that time frame, that were a fairly popular group. I know especially among the United Pentecostal Church International they were called the Magruders. It was a husband and wife, and then there was usually I think a third person with them as a trio. And some of you probably have heard of them. If you haven't, you can go on YouTube and hear some of their songs. There's a couple of them that stand out. One of them is "I'm Just Warming Up." It's a great, encouraging, uplifting song. Another one is "I'm Going Home with Jesus." And part of that chorus says, "In the twinkling of an eye, I've made my reservation for a mansion in the sky." So if you need a little pick-me-up today, it's not Music Monday, but that might help you. But there's another song, and I think this was one of their more recent ones. Brother and Sister Magruder have now passed away, but I think this is one of their later songs. And forgive me for not knowing the exact story and context, but I have seen a couple of videos on YouTube where Sister Magruder had sung this song during a time of very serious physical problems. And I want to read to you the first verse and then the chorus, and I'm encouraging you to go look this one up, especially if what I'm saying today is has any relevance to where you are right now. I think there's a powerful message in this song. And so the first verse says this: "Today I faced a mountain that I have no strength to climb, and the struggle of the journey left me weak, both in body and in mind. From where I stand to the peak is a distance on my own I cannot reach. So this journey of 1,000 steps begins right here on my knees," because the bottom line, figuratively speaking, the place where you can best get that macro view from time to time is a place of prayer. Or, and I think this is actually maybe the little bit of the easier way to do it, and that's through a time of worship and praise. And so then the chorus says this: "Soon I'll soar like an eagle, high on wings of grace. Far into the heavens, I can almost see God's face, rising in His splendor to heights I never knew." And here it is: "What once looked like a mountain's just a hill from heaven's point of view." When we are in the micro, at the foot of the mountain looking up, it is so overwhelming. It is so daunting to think we've got to climb that mountain, and we do have some mountains we have to climb. But when we rise above it, when the Spirit of God lifts us up, what once looked like an unclimbable mountain now looks simply like a hill from heaven's point of view. And might I add, like an anthill from heaven's point of view. So I think once again in the crisis that we are in, I think there's application to what I've shared with you today. But as I've said in almost every message, and I think in many of these videos, the point of this is not just simply so we can get through the rest of this COVID-19 crisis, but really I'm quite certain you can already think of things prior to this situation that this relates to. And then of course, once we come through this, there will be plenty of times where we still will be caught up in the micro view of where we are, that we need from time to time to let the Spirit of the Lord give us heaven's point of view so we can see that macro view and see that in the end, as the Scripture promises, all things will work together for our good according to His purpose. I want to thank you again for spending some of your time to watch and listen to this, and it continues to be my prayer that God is not only keeping you, but helping you to grow and develop throughout this season in Jesus' name.